Okay, so it's 8:03.
Right.
Uh, Now we formally welcome the test mode is over. This is truly a privilege to have the 10th session of All That's Kerala. And as jokingly today, Mr. Joseph and I, we were discussing over the call that people have started calling me that now you can actually tell much about Kerala without going to that place because for the last 10 sessions, we have been discussing about multiple subjects. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Mohit. I'm the founder of City Book Leaders, and alongside Mr. MP Joseph, who graciously accepted our invitation to lead this initiative where we can actually take Kerala to the world, of course through online, and there are few benefits that we have because of corona. Earlier, to know Kerala you actually needed a lifetime, but now every month we host these sessions twice, and that's how we can know so much about Kerala, from the cuisines to the politics to the movies to the cricket to the curries and to the art, and also to the to the history of Kerala, to the richness of Kerala. Everything has been discussed as of now. But today is a very unique session, and I welcome our guest, Mr. Riyas Komu, to be our guest for this session. And I now request Mr. Joseph to take us into one very interesting, insightful journey of Kerala today with All That's Kerala. Ladies and gentlemen, you may please post your questions in the Q&A box during the session. Mr. MP Joseph has set up multiple gadgets around him so that he can actually see your questions and can take up in the subsequent discussion that we go. Have a great evening, sir.
Thank you so much, Mohit. It's always a pleasure to hear you introduce all that skill every time you come up with something new. Thanks so much. Um, I'm going to pick out a word before, yes. And on my part, let me welcome everybody to the 10th episode of All That's Kerala, a chat along the backwaters, which is a fortnightly program. Every 2 weeks, we come on Saturdays and bring up this program for you. It's being co-hosted by City Book Leaders, of which Mohit is the chief executive, and the Kerala Museum at Edapalli in Kochi. Uh, All That's Kerala is a program that introduces Kerala to the country and to the world, and of course to Kerala itself. I start off by thanking Mohit and City Book Leaders and his team, and Aditi Nair of the Kerala Museum Kochi. They have been an invaluable support in this program, providing not only all the necessary backups, but ideas and concepts as well. Today's episode, as Mohit said, is very unique. And it's very special to me because it's on a subject which I do not know much about. The subject is art as neighborhood, which for me is a very difficult subject, very difficult to understand. But never mind that, because we have someone as our guest who can elucidate the concept for us. We have with us today Riyas Komu, sculptor and social thinker. He's a thought leader who's been trying to bring art and society closer together. And above all, for those of us who are who are who are in love of arts or love of Kerala or of Kochi, he is the co-founder of the Kochi Biennale. He's the co-founder along with Bose Krishnamachari, whom we had on the show a couple of months earlier. And above all that, Riyas Komu is a friend of mine, like almost everyone who's been here, ever since the first Kochi Biennale began. And it began 12 minutes past 12 noon on the 12th of December, 2012. Today again is the 12th of December. So it's 20 years since the first Biennale began. So it's a very special day. Let me welcome Riyas Komu. Riyas Komu really needs no introduction to any of us, or especially to the world of art. Riyas Komu was born in Kerala, but he moved to Mumbai when he was just 20 or 21 to study literature. And like all great men, he switched over from literature. And moved to do a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in fine arts from the Sir J.J. School of Arts in Mumbai. Uh, and since then, he has been immersed in art and pushing the boundaries of art. His Uru Art Harbor, a cultural hub housed in an old warehouse in Cochin, was an attempt to promote contemporary Indian art that opened in 3 years ago, sometime in November 2017. He also launched a 2 month inaugural exhibition titled Mattanjeri, named after the historic quarter in Cochin, in which the Uru Harbor, Art Harbor is based, which brought together over a dozen artists and research collectives to reclaim that the Mattanjeri. Uh, to me, the first concept of a neighborhood that I try to understand. So thank you for being with us, Riyas Komu. Welcome, Riyas, to All That's Kerala Chat Along the Backwaters. Our conversation today, ladies and gentlemen, would be on art as neighborhood, which is a subject which Riyas himself had suggested to me. And I've got a confession to make, Riyas. Art as a neighborhood is not a subject I understand very much. I might have understood the subject more if it had been styled as neighborhood as art. That would have meant to me uh, that we must see our neighborhoods as works of art, as a natural organic art, an unconscious art of the people themselves, an unconscious or even a subconscious people's art. But the other way around, art as neighborhood is much more difficult for me to understand. Uh, you're an intellectual. I'm not, Riaz. And to the extent that I've understood you, I believe that you are looking at, say, for example, the nation as a neighborhood, or a city like Mumbai as a neighborhood, or as Cochin as a neighborhood, or earlier, as I said, Mattanjeri as a neighborhood. Uh, that is how you are looking at as a neighborhood. That is understandable. Why even the whole wide world can be looked upon as a neighborhood. But what I do not really understand is the concept of art as neighborhood. And I'm sure many of our listeners might also be wondering what art as neighborhood really means. So let's start off by asking you, what do you mean by art as neighborhood? And if the neighborhood, for example, is the nation, the country, India, then art as neighborhood translates into art as the nation or art as the country. My first question to you then, Riaz, is uh, what do you mean by art as the neighborhood? What do you mean, for example, as art as the nation or art as the country or art as India? What is that?
Thank you so much, sir, for first of all inviting me to speak on this All That's Kerala forum, and also Mohit, and also all members of Kerala Museum, for organizing this. In many levels, that I'm very happy to be, in conversation with you, because uh, my associations with Kochi since last 10 years, we have had many interesting conversations, and I still remember 2014, the opening, you're carrying an umbrella, and where we are all standing, in a heavy rain, and trying to kind of literally inaugurate the second edition of Biennale. I think that's one of my best memories I have. You along with you having on the stage and speaking very proudly about Kochi and its whereabouts, and the Biennale's inauguration. So uh, see the why I proposed, when we had a chat, that art as a neighborhood, since not really 10 years, but since last 5 years, since 2015, I started actually, looking at my involvement with art administration as from a point of view where, how can we, even as an administrator, as an artist, and how can you learn, from a site where you're engaging with. So I started thinking about, the concept of neighborhood through the lens of a post-independent India. Then I thought, we have to, we were in the initial years of post-independent era, we were, we designed our nation as a neighborhood, and we did many interesting projects. I mean, if we have time, we can go into it. But as you said, I moved out of Kerala in '92 to study art. I mean, in fact, I left literature in Kerala. I was under Calicut University, but I came to study textile design in Bombay, and I continued learning art in JJ School of Art. That's when, from moving from nation as a neighborhood, I moved to city as a neighborhood. I mean, I was trying to kind of literally learn, the idea of, neighborhood, looking at city as a location. Then maybe Kochi was the site, I mean, which taught me, the concept of art as a neighborhood, because then there is another project which invoked me, was that subcontinent as a neighborhood. I mean, so that I was actually looking at this site as a possible location to study the concept of neighborhood. Maybe before I, as we speak further, we will slowly explore, why art can be a neighborhood. I mean, so maybe, I just want to kind of start before we go ahead. I want to start about, speak about what Srinarayana Guru once said. I mean, once after, the early, after the communities process was formed in Kerala, there was a very interesting debate, and few people came as groups to meet Srinarayana Guru, and they were asking about, how do you deal with your wealth? I mean, then there was one group arguing for a patrilineal approach, and there was another group, fighting for a matrilineal approach. So Guru actually advises them and tells them these are not the way forward for us as a community. We should be neighborlineal. So I think it's something which attracted me a lot. I mean, the concept of, as a community being physically neighborlineal. Then I was, looking at the other aspects, and there is another unrecorded story, again relating with Srinarayana Guru. It's about a woman who lost her husband, and they were having family disputes to deal with their own wealth. So Guru again advises her to, do you give the wealth distributed among your families and your children and whoever, but give one big portion of your wealth to your neighbors, because they are going to be, there forever. So I just, I'm actually trying to kind of connect that kind of a conceptual idea that, where if Matanjeri can be a neighborhood to host art, so the community in Matanjeri can conceive art also as their neighborhood. So that's how, I started, thinking about, because...
So you're actually telling Riyas that art itself is a form of neighborhood.
It is. I mean, in the context of...
You've got to understand art as a neighborhood. Yeah, that's a concept which I suppose is, to me, slightly easier to understand. But let me move on. You said you grew up in Bombay, at least your art part grew up in Bombay, in Mumbai, which was your second home. You have gone through the gullies, the by lanes and the lanes of Bombay. You even have said once that Bombay is your university.
Yeah.
And that you love the resilience of the Mumbai cars. How has Mumbai impacted on your art?
I think it's not just the Mumbai as a city. I mean, the timing. I mean, the year I came into Bombay was 1992. As we all know, it was a year, where India was also liberalizing itself as a nation. This is also a year that we saw the demolition of Babri Masjid, and Bombay city saw riots, and also we saw a lot of other issues like bomb blasts and there was a lot of atrocities that which contrasted my life living in Kerala and coming to Bombay. So that I think the initial experiences of coming to Bombay, believing it is one of the most beautiful cosmopolitan settlement. I think those incidents shaped my thinking around, looking into subjects as human settlements, the city as a biggest location for human settlements, and migrations to kind of, migrants to move in. So there are many things, like, one is my education in JJ, but at the same time, Bombay city as a city which had, a very strong history of art patronage, and it's been part of a major, the custodian of like many great, art, legends, many many connoisseurs. I mean, there was also kind of a, you have seen, an institution like JJ, which is in the heart of the city, like, bringing out, major talents. So I had that maybe a great, possibility to kind of go through that. But in the context of today's, topic, uh, what I looked at as a subject for me in Bombay was the migrants to the Bombay city, where, see, that's also very much very important to kind of, to connect with when we speak about Matanjeri as a site or Fort Kochi as a site. When you look at Bombay as a site, it is also a site where, diverse communities come together and live. But I just want to kind of contrast it with by saying that, when why do, people come into a city like Bombay? I mean, where do they escape from? That's something which fascinated me as a topic to study. And those experiences have given me, maybe tremendous energy to kind of look into human settlements as a subject to study in Indian context. And many of the travels which I made, locating from Bombay, the residencies which I did in Karachi. And I think Bombay is not just been the university. I think the people who have migrated to Bombay and the stories I've heard from them has been some of the biggest lessons I have.
You just said that 1992 was the year that you landed in Bombay, and that was a watershed year. Do you think the destruction of the Babri Masjid Mosque impacted on your art?
I mean, I would say very much, because that's the time that, I started seeing, like, a lot of, what do you say? Like, a certain sense of marginalization in social space. I mean, especially coming from Kerala. So most of my early art, if you look at some of my shows, some of my travel experience, the reflections of some of my travel experiences into my work, I wanted to kind of discuss conflicting religion, and speak or, look at sites that where, the ideas of confluence and ideas of diversity or the ideas of coexistence can come in. Because I, maybe a post, 92 experience as an artist, I was always looking at a site to dissent, a site to kind of locate arguments to kind of, to speak about, the India's diversity or, the constitutional morality. So I think, I think it's still impacting me. I mean, as a subject.
It's a continuum, yes. You also said your mind was always thinking about how to create a site to engage and use the idea of diversity, as you now mentioned, multiculturalism, plurality, etc., by celebrating the histories of human settlement. Those are your words I read. But often the histories of human settlement have been histories of war and conflict, death and destruction. So how do you reconcile these contradictions? Histories of human settlements have meant wars, destruction, and conflict. How can you celebrate then the histories of human settlements in art?
See, that's where, one needs to kind of really, try to kind of understand, India as a nation. Because, see, if you really look at Indian villages as a site, what I'm very much fascinated with, how does a village settlement as a neighborhood coexist? Because it celebrates its own traditions, its own cultures, its own diversities, its own rituals, its own, deities, so there is even a kind of lot of ancestral memories. So, what, our nation has gone through is like, because of one major conflict of like, instilling caste as a kind of disruptive agent. We have seen, like, people migrating to kind of other kind of settlements where you can live anonymously. So there's a different kind of an anonymity which it provides. So the later, we have seen, these human settlements goes into ghettoizations and like other kind of conflicts. We have seen that. That is maybe the junction as a nation we are going through. In that context, I was very much interested in a place like Matanjeri or Fort Kochi, where 40 different communities living together, and it's a microcosm to experiment. As though we see a lot of chaos and violence, and because of very there are reasons for it. Religion has been a reason, caste has been a reason, economic deprivation has been a reason, terrorism has been a reason. But when it comes to kind of to avoid, where do you exercise the possible discourses? That's where I found a place like in a place like Kerala, a location like a Fort Kochi or Matanjeri, where you can exercise it as a site to dissent and also make your own opinion and also celebrate the diversity and plurality and coexistence. I think that's something, I think I've seen a lot of ripple effects of that idea, and many people, coming up with a similar kind of thought processes to engage with the community settlements and, like derive an art project out of it. I've seen it happening in Pune, in Goa, in many other places post-Biennale. So, yeah, I think
art has been divisive as well. For example, I'm just quoting an example off the head. The paintings of Sita by M.F. Hussain has stirred controversies. How do you account for that then? Art can bring together, but art can possibly also disrupt.
Yeah, I think it's a very complex question, because I've always followed in initial years Hussain as an artist. But what we have seen is like Hussain was an artist who understood Indian myth much beautifully, like many artists. So maybe the context where Hussain's work was discussed was a kind of in a conflicting time. So I look at it as just one of the incidents in India where even an artist who understood the Indian, so somebody who hails from Pandharpur and who had great understanding about, who was a gypsy, who was almost like somebody who carrying the tradition of Tukaram, had to suffer. This was something like one could have discussed it beautifully and negotiated further. But yeah, I think those incidents like keep coming back, whether it is from the premise of art or elsewhere, or even from cinema, literature, or elsewhere. It keeps
Speaking of religions and caste and all these conflicts, religions across the world, whatever be the religion, seem to be in conflict with one another all across the world. Doesn't matter what the religion is. It doesn't matter where the neighborhoods are, Asian neighborhood, South Asian, Europe, everywhere. Religions across the world seem to be in conflict. Does art have solutions to offer for religions in conflict, as we see happening across the world?
So I think
yes.
Yeah, please, sir.
I know it's tough, a question, but
no, I think we need to keep reinventing ourselves to understand. For example, I had an experience of traveling to Pakistan in 2004 as part of a Kochi residency project. And the time I spent almost 1 month, and I spent a lot of time in a place like Makli Necropolis, one of the biggest ceremonial sites in the world. But what I learned from that location is like, that was a place that, is part of our, civilization. It is part of Indus. But, what we have reached today, forgetting those kind of, beautiful histories of the learnings through religion or, the cultural inhabitants, we've reached at a site of conflict. And so I actually immediately after coming back from that residency, I did a project called Faith Accompli. which had a look, a critical analysis on what's going on in today's time. In fact, even after looking at that project after 16 years, I think I can revisit and re-exhibit those works, because, and what I learned from those things, I think that's something which I have also invested a lot in Cochin. So when we came up with a project where we invited artists from all across the world, there is a certain, what Kochi proposed also is, a kind of a remedy, or, it became, a site that where healing is possible when there is a lot of conflict and, hatred. So I think the ripple effect of Kochi, to some extent, I would like to kind of learn or read into that. Art can. Even some of the slogans which we used while we launched our Biennale. It was like, art is life itself. There was, we were asking people to kind of reflect upon once on history of coexistence. History, for example, Pattanam excavation site, the why we associated with Muslims Heritage Project. Today, that location is actually giving us many interesting learnings. I still remember, the KCHR director, PJ Cherian used to articulate the location so beautifully. He used to say, Pattanam is a site that where you dig for 1 meter, you cover 1,000 years. You dig for another meter, you cover 2,000 years. That's the historic layers that, Malayalis have been living with. You dig 1 more meter means like, you go beyond these conflicting religions. So I think I used to enjoy that, archaeological or, that excavation metaphor while we were also making art. We produced, in fact, if you really dig into the history of last 4 editions of art production in Cochin, I think it's one of the biggest location in a post-independent India where art was produced for the purpose of, healing social concerns. So I think, that's one reason I said, that's also one reason I'm saying art is neighborhood to kind of, to live.
Very true. Let me move on to areas where there's less conflicts. In today's Times of India, I don't know whether you read it, Kerala edition, Surumi Mammootty, who I believe is Mammootty's daughter, speaks of how, for her, art is being alone with herself, which is when the best creativity pours out. And she says, every person has creativity, and that pours out in times like this. And she says the pandemic has taught artists to discover new light and shade in their lives and work. The confines of the home, like work from home, art from home has opened up for her possibilities, noticing how beautiful even the small world around us is. How has COVID impacted on art?
I think if you really look at what has happened in India, especially, I think like any other projects, the procedures and the processes has halted. To some extent, in the physical reality is not there. But there is the galleries have been kind of engaging online and trying to kind of reach out to artists and giving them platforms. But in terms of I also look at it from another angle, because myself and another friend of mine, Sudarak Olve, we came up with an online photography magazine called Samyak Drishti. So what we found was that that was immediately after doing a project with NDTV with young artists to kind of support them. But what I saw in the language of most of the artists, if you really talk about, what happens to the art in the context of its subject matter, what kind of subject it's been handling. Most of the time, I felt that it was migration was one of the key issues. Otherwise, I didn't see, major topics. Recently I saw some works. It is talking about, the farmer issues, but mainly even the Samyak Drishti project which we did, we saw a lot of lament And a lot of concerns raised among people about losing freedom. I mean, there are a lot of projects which has come up. I mean, I saw one interesting project by a Chinese artist. I mean, talking about the fear of surveillance, and most of the projects. I mean, today I've been kind of looking through. It reflects on because of this over presence of digital surveillance. I mean, is giving some kind of a fear, even among the younger artists and some of the artists who do the socio-political projects, because there is a vulnerability of surveillance which they are all fearing. I mean, that's something which I've been seeing. But I mean, but I like some artists, I mean, who came up, even which forced me to kind of look at the issue of migration in Indian context, I mean, which is, I think, becoming a study, much more a kind of a deeper study. And I'm following, but like I was saying that, I mean, what was a neighborhood for a villager in India, and why he escapes that kind of a reality and comes to a city like Bombay or Delhi or Calcutta. And immediately when he saw this pandemic is scary and, like scattering his whereabouts, he rushes back to his ancestry. He actually moves back to a kind of settlement. So what I feel is like, I mean, what me as an artist, like, I mean, who learned is like, there is the Indian citizens are fearing, that he is losing his neighborhood, whether it was in a village, whether when he moved to kind of a city where he felt kind of a sense of neighborhood, he was again, thrown away. I mean, so I think what I see in the art world is also, the concerns which is being expressed around these kind of human, helplessness, and which you can see, like, I mean, maybe going to become like one of the important topic once our galleries become physical. And yeah.
Let me ask you this $1,000,000 question, which actually Surami Mammootty's article starts with that. Laugh pour laugh. Is art for the sake of art itself, or which seems to be a very restricted view. Should art be enjoyed only by artists, or should art be for a wider society? Should art be for the neighborhood and for the society? I know what your answer is going to be, but would you discuss this in detail, in a slightly greater detail? Is art for art's sake, or is art for society, for men, for individuals, for human beings, for women, for girls, for boys? What's the purpose of art?
I think, I mean, it's very multifaceted. I mean, there is art for art's sake happening. I mean, people are content with it. I mean, there is art for, political mobilization. People are very happy about it. I mean, that art is able to kind of create such kind of mobilization. There is art to protest. I mean, people are very happy with it. I mean, so see, art is no more a site to possess. The art is a site to kind of share nowadays. I mean, see, if what we did, even sitting in a place like Kochi, the art which was produced there, it broke all perceptions that people had about, I mean, what is art meant for? I mean, what is the purpose of art? It actually literally, like, I mean, broke all perceptions. I mean, people used to think that art is like, I mean, a canvas of Raja Ravi Verma. I mean, so, and people, were forced to see a work of Raul Zurita, standing in, salt water and, show his concerns about, a boy from, Syria, I mean, who, died, I mean, Alan Kurdi I'm talking about. So it's so I don't know, I mean, this, this argument goes on, but I think, I mean, now art is available for all different segments, but I'm somebody who stands for, the art should have its own purpose for, I mean,
We've got a couple of questions, Riyaz, which I'll take a bit later. But there's one question that bothers me. Often art seems to be for the rich and famous. We talk of art galleries, art consultants, art dealers. We talk of lakhs of rupees for pieces of art. Is really art becoming the playground of the rich and the famous?
I disagree. I mean, because that's one reason. Like, I mean, see, for example, like, I mean, 2000, early 2000, we saw art boom happening in India. So we saw, like, I mean, a lot of takers for all kinds of art, and there were a lot of investors came in, and a lot of international platforms came in. So that it almost sounded like, I mean, art was getting liberated from, like, I mean, exclusivity. I mean, people who had even like small disposable income started collecting it. I mean, there were a lot of forums which was growing up. Then you see, like, I mean, something like a recession hits in 2008. What happens that time? That's when people started realizing that, I mean, we cannot depend fully on a market to kind of enjoy art. I mean, we need to find alternate site to kind of produce, which is not normally about like the commerce of it. So we need to have a site to experiment. We need to have a site to, storytelling. It's not just to, produce a work of art which goes into somebody's drawing room. I mean, it's art can be perishable. Art can be an experience. So I remember, like, I mean, in 2008, 2009, there were a lot of conversations among our friends that, I mean, what do you do now? I mean, because, the market has gone down, art is not selling, but we need to create one's own ecosystem. That ecosystem is where, I mean, for example, we have museums like Kerala Museum, which is operational in Kerala. But what happens there is, like, unless and until you create a community around that, that community, you can call it also as a neighborhood. So that's what sustains projects like this. So the elitism gets deleted. I mean, I will again go back to what was our initial conversations with the government of Kerala in 2010, when we thought of, like, I mean, bringing a project like a Biennale, which is non-commercial, which is almost like a kind of celebration of, like, I mean, experimentation, disciplinary practices. It was similar to the Triennale, which happened in 1968 in Delhi under the leadership, the ideas of Nehru. So it was a site that we opened up, so we were also opening up and inviting different kinds of art practices, which is not about, like, I mean, being, inviting a custodian for it. See, we had 5 lakh visitors. I mean, and how many of them are the patrons or the buyers of it? I mean, maybe, 100, 200. So you have, so you have to create sites to break these notions that, I mean, art is an elitist exercise. It's not. I mean, I don't think so. Most of the art which you see today. Yeah, please, sir.
There's a couple of interesting questions. I'll take a couple of them. One is from Sri Kumar Raghavan, who says the education sector is now becoming interdisciplinary and perhaps has to. But how can art be integrated into that process, into the interdisciplinary education process? And Ram Menon from Impresario Events, in a sense, you have answered Ram's question. He says, how do you make art more affordable so that it reaches the middle class and even the lower middle class income segments? Very quickly, if you can answer these questions, it'd be very nice.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to, like, I mean, Kochi as a site of learning. I mean, as we did the project, Kochi was immediately known as a people's biennale, because it brought in, which broke all conventional thinking around art and its viewership. So, I mean, answering the first part of the question, so what we focused was art education, actually. I mean, so we realized it's important to kind of educate people about, like, on what kind of art is produced, what are the different terms and streams, and like, what is the idea of curation, what is installation. So we did an education process there. Into that, we also introduced, if you notice, one major project called Students Biennale, which was never done in the world anywhere else. So we actually connected Kochi with all art institutions in the country, and later with the subcontinent also. So Kochi has actually been operating like a site of learning about art practices, and many have benefited out of it. So what we did as a process, that we had volunteers, we had people interpretation guides. Then we also introduced a project called ABC, Art by Children. So it's important that, I mean, once we temporarily come up with a project of this nature, what from an organization point of view, like, I mean, we have tried to kind of to create perspectives out of it. I mean, so it has reached out. Such exercises we need to continue. So we also argued with the government, with the ABC project, we need to have one classroom in every school, which becomes a site where a student can go even after 4 o'clock, after the school closes. He can go and engage in art making. So children go to kind of playgrounds. I mean, if he's interested in like, football or cricket or running or whatever, why not, give them a provision? So we did, and we need to, introduce that. And the last question about accessibility, I think we are in a very nascent stage when we still talk about it. I mean, because we didn't systematically, take those kind of possibilities to kind of, educate people about different streams of art. We don't teach art as a subject in the schools. So we learn about art, I mean, if you are really interested in it at a certain age, and that's not enough. So we need to have movements to kind of...
Before I go to the next question that has come up, let me just remind that the next episode of All That's Kerala will be a fortnight from today on the 26th of December, just after Christmas, on Saturday. We will be then talking about the cup that cheers, the drink of choice, tea and Kerala. And we'll have as our guest Dr. Sri Narendranath Dharmaraj, who until recently was a chief executive and whole-time director of Harrison Malayalam, one of the largest tea growers in the country. Sri Dharmaraj will take us through the magic of growing tea in the hilltops of Munnar and other places in Kerala, and the issues and problems related to tea planters, and of course, the future of the tea industry in the state. Let me move on with the next question, which has come in. This is from Chandra Mohan Nair. Again, he's based in Mumbai, and he asks whether you can also suggest ways of improving community space through art, and how community groups can help the promotion of art.
See, from what I learned from Kochi by doing this project, I think as a case study, I feel any community or any urban space or even small town, they love art projects if it is capable of telling their stories. So I mean, if it becomes a kind of location creating or telling many stories. So I think what is lacking in that area is that we don't have proper infrastructure. But sitting in a place like Bombay, I think it is very much possible, and we have small community projects which is based in Bandra. I mean, we have this projects like Kalagoda, though it was not really extending into kind of a immediate community, but I strongly feel from my experiences that any project which celebrates the local, I mean the inhabitants of that place, really takes deep root, and it grows there. I mean, it is the right seed which you're putting in, and people want art. I mean, so because I've had experiences, even people telling, the seniors telling us, if you protect art, in according to, the many of experiences, if you protect art, I mean, art will protect you. So I still remember, people, to inspire us, just don't leave it aside. I mean, whatever you guys are doing, challenging the system against all odds, it is actually a great investment, a cultural deposit which you're doing.
Yeah. You just spoke about a students' Biennale, you spoke about ABC art by children. Are we compartmentalizing art too much? Can we then look forward to a women's Biennale, an old man's Biennale, a senior citizens Biennale? I mean, are we compartmentalizing art too much?
No, it is part of the existing, educational structure. I mean, we just followed that. I mean, because nowhere in the world there is students' biennial. I mean, I'll tell you what happens with the students' biennial. The first edition, what we were able to do was that, I mean, we could take a blueprint of the nation itself. What is our young students thinking? A student from Srinagar or, a student from Aurangabad. So the art made it possible because there was something created, about their angst. So it's a right proposal to kind of go forward, because we have students like, who are enrolling into art education for 5 years. It's almost like, going to study medicine, and what happens to them. So it was our responsibility to kind of bring them to a place that where masters, major artists are doing or bringing their work. So it becomes, that's why I use the term that, that Kochi became a site of learning even for the students who were exhibiting there. They were traveling in, we were giving them workshops, scholarships, and they were coming and spending time in Kochi. The same thing with children. So how do you have a 4-month long project? It's a season which you're getting. So how do you bring the children to engage with the temporary museum structure or a temporary art site? And they were, literally coming and enjoying it. I mean, there is nothing like, the way, this is not compartmentalization. This is like a beautiful structure. There is no gender difference in it. It is the ongoing. I remember, talking about students Biennale outside India. So people wanted to kind of model it. When Australia, one organization from Liverpool wanted to to sign off ABC with it, because they never thought about ABC. ABC can mean art by children, So that's, I think some of Kochi's intervention has been helpful in, putting the seed.
Thank you, I think.
Yeah.
Right. I think you made the point there. There's a question from Joy Uman. He says, Riyas, is art a luxury? How does art make a difference to the lives of the poor? How do we make art relevant to the poor neighborhoods or settlements where poverty is the only real issue? How can art move into their lives?
I think this is maybe one of the important questions which I've asked now. In the context of this particular, the point I was trying to make, art as a neighborhood. See, what happens when a social space takes up art as a kind of possibility also to to revive its own economics, revive its own possibilities, to bring in different aspects of it, whether it is design, whether it is the ways of producing, and the multidisciplinary possibilities. So I think what is lacking, in the context of Kerala, I can ask you the same question back by saying that, okay, you invested 10 years in Kerala, which has never happened in India before. You came up with a project that, which brings in the whole world to Kochi, the whole large art community, the decision makers, the policy makers, museum directors, the opinion makers. Then you do a project, and then I'm also asking the same question: how do you become the custodian of such kind of possibility, whether it is cultural, economical, or other ways? So we actually need to become a community that which holds on to the possibilities in the future, which I think we have to do collectively. I see as a system. Sometimes I feel there is a systemic failure in understanding a project which has been experimented in Kochi for 10 years. That why it is moving into a kind of a landmark of a place, that where there is economic possibilities. So the art becomes, the real neighborhood which you're living with. It is multidisciplinary.
I'd like to assure you, Riyas, I don't think these questions reflect a lack of understanding of what has happened in Kochi through the Biennale over the last 10 years. It's only an attempt to further deepen an understanding of it. So these are questions I will try to bring out from your depths, the thinking on it. So don't take it amiss. There's a very interesting point which Nambudri Pad makes. He says, growing up in his village, his exposure to art was the temple. The temple was where art was. When we go there, art surrounded me, is what he says. In today's world, how do we make art a part of life? Not only to be experienced in a museum or in a Biennale, but take art to the people, to the neighborhood. A quick answer, because I think we may be running short of time.
I think it's a it's an interesting observation, but I think we have many forums that which is going beyond such kind of imaginations already. We see a lot of experimentations, a lot of technology interventions in art, which gives very unusual experiences of art making. So I think I don't need to go into the detail of that question much.
Right, thank you. I'm going to end with the future. You see, technology will take over art, will it not, one day? With the preponderance of technology, do you think art as art will no longer be relevant as in the past. For example, 3D printing can produce furniture, tables, chairs. So 3D printing can produce a work of art, perhaps. A sculpture it can produce, and you may, as a sculptor, become irrelevant. So can technology take over art? Can 3D printing, for example, take over your work as an artist? I'm laughing, but these are
no, I have a very, just one word answer to that. No, I mean, it can never.
Why?
No,
I've got a one-word question to that. Why?
No, because I think the human emotions, the human imagination, you cannot match very easily with, the programmed technological interventions. So I think, the artistic imagination.
Can artificial intelligence not take over art?
No, I still feel that. I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence, but I still feel that, there always there will be a kind of limitation because we keep inventing. We new terminology which is coming after artificial intelligence. So that's what I feel. But the handmade, that what you make. I think it has got completely a different kind of existence anywhere.
There is this Neil George from Mumbai. I think he says he's from Mumbai. For the future of Biennale, will we see more venues outside Matanjeri and demonstrate Cochin's beauty? It's now in Fort Cochin and Matanjeri. Can we see more venues outside that? Is what he asks.
Yeah, I think that's one question which I was also asking in relationship with the possibilities of making art communities. I think we as a system need to kind of relook at permanent venues and produce those. Otherwise, we can keep the floating biennial every 2 years in different venues and we move on. So the temporality will remain, but sometimes it's always good to kind of give a sense of permanency, at least in the form of infrastructure.
By the way, Neil wants to get in touch with you later, Neil. Maybe I'll put you two together later. There are lots of questions coming in, but I think we may have to wind up. There is this question from Raghavan. He's asked, what is contemporary in art? And how much does music, architecture impact art? Very quick answer to that, if you have something ready.
I think it's a subject which needs a lot of explanation in many contexts. But I always feel that relevance plays a big role in making a work of art very contemporary, and I don't relate the contemporariness with technology or media or anything. So the relevance.
Then let me close this. It's been a very interesting session. Let me close it by asking you, now that COVID is getting finally over, where do you see art going in the future? And along with that, I'll take this question from Narendranath Dharmaraj, who asks, who of course lauds you for championing the idea of art as a platform for projecting human issues and also bringing the common man into art and its possibilities. What is your future vision? So that's perhaps a nice way to end it. What is your future vision, and what do you see as the future of art post-COVID?
I think I've been, attending a lot of webinars, and recently there were some launches of festivals online, and what I felt was that there is a craving, among everybody, whether it's an organizer or an artist or the maker of objects, they want to get back to physical reality. So I think that that's what everybody is craving for. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I think we've nearly touched the hour. It's 56 minutes past 7. So I think I'll stop here, and I'll just remind our viewers that the next episode of All That's Kerala will be a fortnight from now on 26th of December 2020, the day after Christmas. We'll be then talking about the cup that cheers, about tea, the drink of choice in Kerala, tea and Kerala. And we'll have Sri Dharmaraj, Narendranath Dharmaraj, who was Chief Executive Officer and whole-time Director of Harrison Malayalam, one of the largest tea growers in the country, speaking to us on the tea industry, growing tea, its issues connected with it, on 26th December 2020. I think I'll close here because I think it's already 8:57, and I'll hand over the mic, the floor to Mohit to conclude the episode. Thank you, Riyas. It's been the questioning has been tough because we've covered a lot of issues, including religious issues and issues of art and Kochi Biennale. Thank you so much. I hand over the floor space, the neighborhood. I hand over to Mohit.
Thank you, sir. It was great chatting with you.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you, Mr. Riyas. Truly a pleasure having you here today. And as one of the questions that Mr. Joseph was trying to play you with on was artificial intelligence can take over art. My answer, if somebody would ask to me, it is not possible, because even if artificial intelligence would be able to create sculptures or art, they need a curator to actually do that. They need someone to actually train the machine on that, I guess. And that's what Mr. Komu and great people like him will always keep putting. And I'm very intrigued. What's in your background? Is there a painting or is there a photograph?
I asked the same question earlier.
It's a painting which I'm working towards a project in Abu Dhabi. So it's
see, that's where the emotions can't go out. We cannot make it out. But truly,
okay. I'll put you in the hot seat one day and ask you these difficult questions.
That's the joy of behind the scenes, sir. I truly enjoy. And to everyone who could tune in today, that too on a Saturday evening, thank you very much for taking this community ahead and making this initiative really interesting for all of us to know. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Shabba khair. Let's sign off now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There is this remark from Kenneth Mark, St. Mark's School, saying, very interesting, sir. I enjoyed the session. Thank you for the invite. Thank you so much once again. Riyas, it's been a very interesting experience. I learned a lot. Thank you so much.